Good night, everybody. So in this live stream, I'm gonna be setting up comic book pages for the comic book project. This is the first video I do on InDesign, and it's really cool because I've gotten pretty good at InDesign lately, and this is gonna be a smooth and buttery video. Uh, I'm going to be setting up just the first page of the comic book. I'm going to be setting up some guidelines, some real format for me to go to, and the style for each little frame, and give myself some flexibility on how to be able to change those. And by the end of this live stream, I'll be able to drop in some of the mock renders that I've made so far in Blender so that I can later come in and replace those frames as I continue to illustrate them and continue to change them up. But at least, the beginning of the story is set, and I can start setting up these pages so I can start then mocking up the entire story and then come back and refine these frames. So just go ahead and get started. I have InDesign open over here. I'm going to switch over my camera. And as you can see, we have a totally blank file, just starting from nothing. So first things first, what is the typical size of a comic book? Now, I got asked this question recently, is it going to be digital or is it going to be print? And it's going to be both, right? I've mentioned before there might be this interesting format where if it is digital, it could be an interactive comic book where the frames are actually live. They're like little animations or looped, or maybe even not even looped, like fully telling a story, but at least they come to life a little bit with some elements that are moving. In any case, I am initially going to just work this out from being a print work. And then if I can do the extra of using a platform or some sort of interactive aspect, maybe web-based, to get these things animated, it would still be based off of the same format. That way, I can work off of the constraints of print because print has more constraints, and then take the freedom that I can get out of doing digital and in order to animate it, right? And not just be images, but actually be video files or GIFs. And the first things first, let's look up the typical size of a comic book. So typical size for a comic book page. And, frames can vary, but I'm going to stick to 6 frames per page. And so we see here actually the typical size for a comic book page, or the standard American comic page size, is 6.875 by 10.438. I hate the imperial system, really. We just got to switch to metric already. But we'll go ahead and switch this over to inches. And I'm just going to copy paste these numbers that I am getting. It's really A4. Is comic book in A4? Standard comic books are printed in A4, 210 millimeters by 297 millimeters. So I actually like that better. It's probably more precise. Because I think if I go to web, view all presets, oh, here we go. We have A4 right here. So if I select A4 and if I switch to millimeters, that matches perfectly what I'm seeing online. So there we are. We can go, oh, I hit web. Print A4. There we are. And rather than work in picas, I'd rather work in millimeters. They're just nice round units. And we'll get into it. Pages. Well, the entire book is going to have somewhere between 30 and 40 pages for the first issue. I'm aiming for having the first issue done sooner rather than later. But I realized that having 30 to 40 pages done by the end of the year, as I originally set out to do, I might actually accomplish that much sooner than I think. So in any case, I'm just going to start off with 1 page, right? Because then I could just set everything up on that first page and then just start duplicating so I can keep all my assets throughout all the pages. Start page is obviously number 1. I'm not going to worry about columns, margins, and all this other stuff, the bleeds. I'm just going to leave as default and change those later, must I, depending on who the print outsourcing company will be. All right, I don't need this whole welcome thing, but I guess, yeah, I know how to use InDesign. Why are you giving me all this? There we go. So we got a blank page. So obviously the first page is going to be a title page, right? So I'm going to move over here and go to pages. Looks like I'm frozen for whatever reason. I'm going to close other things out. And there we go. Pages. So there I have my first page. And I can just click down here on the right to create a new page. And the first page is going to be left all by itself. If you see here, if I add a third page, it's going to look like a spread, right? So this is actually what I want, because I can preview how the second and third page is going to look together, how the fourth and fifth page would look together, so on and so forth. So the first page isn't going to get any formatting because this would be the cover. So I'm just going to start out on the second page and look at it independent from the third. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the third. Now, first things first, I'm going to set up some guidelines. So for that, I'm just going to drag over from the rulers on the left and snap them to the middle, and it should snap, right? So right there, we see it snapping at 105, so I can get the middle of my page. And I'm actually splitting into thirds, right? So it probably should be a good way to split this into thirds, but I'm just going to go ahead and do some math. So if I go over back into my, oh, like I said here, margins and columns, ruler guides, create guides, and so on and so forth. This may be more rudimentary, my way of going about it, but if my main size was from 0 all the way to, what did we say A4 was in millimeters? It is, A4 is 297. So we take 297 and we divide by 3. We get how much we need each one to be. So that's 99. So these horizontal guides should be sitting at the 99 millimeter mark, which is a very specific one to reach. So I'll just go ahead and go right here where I can see 5 lines in between 95 and 100. Drag my line all the way down here. So 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. Right there, I'm sitting at 99. Next is just copying this down so I can have it sit not at 99, but at 198. Yeah. I've had to do so much math today, and my brain is just not up for it. 198. There we are. Okay. So right there, I got my page split up into thirds. However, I'm not accounting for the margins, and that is fine. I'm going to continue working from here off of the center one and then make sure that all my spacing is regular. And InDesign will tell me that my spacing is regular. The next thing I want to do here is move away from the Essentials layout. I don't like this one too much. I like starting off of Essentials Classic and condensing things here a little bit. So yes, we'll keep this on the side. However, I would like to move these all over on the right because there's no need to have these sticking out on the left and taking up more real estate than they should. Okay, so I have my pages down here. I want to set up my layers. So right here for layers, my bottom layer is going to be panels, at least for now, right? So this way I can set up all my frames. And in order to set up a frame, I'm just going to set them up as shapes, square shapes. Before I do so, always save. I'm going to go here to my live streams and create a new folder for this session. Always save right away. I learned that the hard way today. I thought Photoshop at work had the autosave feature on, and it did not. And I had to double back on a lot of work. So always save right away and make sure that your autosaves are set on 5-minute intervals. 10 minutes just did not cut it. You can actually get quite a bit done in 10 minutes, and it sucks to lose just 10 minutes of work when you're crunched for time. So, InDesign comic book pages. There we are. And we'll call this the template file. Very nice. So I got my shape going, and I'm just going to draw out a shape right here. And as we can see, it's white in the center, or empty really, because we know that from the left-hand side. So these two squares over here on the left, we have our fill. So the red line through the fill means there is no fill, it's just see-through. And then here we have our stroke. So whichever one is sitting on top, that's the one you're editing. So right now I have a black stroke on the outside of the shape, which is perfectly fine. I do all of my branding elements with a 4-point stroke. I'll make sure I have this item selected, and over here in the stroke area, I'm going to set this up to 4. It's actually much thicker when you see it in the scale of this paper. So for it to reflect properly, I think I actually am going to take it down to half of that, to 2. That's nice. Now, in order to have some spacing in between the left and the right, I'm going to just go ahead and copy this over to the right-hand side so that I can set, using my ruler up here, a 2-point spacing. So right there, 1. You can actually do this even easier rather than using the guides. Oops, there we go. Rather than using the guides, I'm just gonna select the square, and using my arrows, because you always move 1 point at a time with the arrows, I'm gonna click 4 to create twice as much spacing as I do have line width. And then I can just resize the left-hand side to meet my margin. There we go. I got my first panel there on the left, and now I can copy again over to the right and take that all the way to the edge so that I have that nice little spacing in there. All right. Next, I got to do the same thing for the bottom. So I'll just copy it down over here, have it meet the very center of the page. All right, so here we see the issue I was having with my guides being at the third of the page, but not necessarily a third of spacing in between, right? So rather than save myself the trouble of having to go through all this math that I need to do, I'm actually just going to resize these in the center in order to meet these third lines. Oops. And really, I mean, I'm setting this up evenly just as a template, but in reality, I'm going to be stretching each one of these panels, right? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go. So that's even spacing between one and the other. The reason I'm going to be stretching all of them is because some frames or some panels are going to be really nice to do in square format. Some of them are nice to be elongated. Some of them are going to be better to be landscape. But the real point here is to kind of just lay this out in a way that I can start sort of just dropping in images and have everything evenly spaced. So I have to have my squares meet up. I'm going to move new guidelines here to set up where the spacing should be. Move this down to meet the third. Stretch this down and then move it up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then bring this back down to my guideline. I think this guideline actually needs to move one lower. So I'll set this one down here as a constant and then just move this one 1 point down and then resize. There we go. And move my guide to the new position by just clicking and dragging. Okay, so real quick right there, we got, ooh, it's having me save again. It's weird. Template file 2. I don't know why it's having me save as though it's doing it for the first time again. Okay. So now that we have our panels set up, I want to set up a page number. So I'll go over here to Object and look for my page number. Object. Type. There we go. Insert special character. No, not a special character. My brain is really not working today, but here I am trying to bring valuable content. I'm always thinking, man, as I do the interactive stuff, the live stream, it's like not everything can go perfect. I just got to get on here and do it and give you the shortened version where I have everything figured out in the edited videos after. If you happen to hop in and know where to send me for page numbers, that would be helpful. Otherwise, I am done trying and I'm going to search. So insert page numbers in InDesign. You might have noticed I didn't come on stream for this past weekend. And the reason for that was it was my birthday on Friday. And although I did do some things every single day in order to advance the content, I just had too many plans to actually be able to come on and stream. So it looks like I was in the right place. Yeah, type, insert special character, markers, and then insert a page number. However, it's grayed out for whatever reason. I'm going to create a new layer to perhaps place this in here. And actually where I want my page numbers to show up isn't in this page, right? Because then I'd be doing it to a single page. What I actually want to do is go over to my pages, and in pages, if I collapse some of these so that I can make my page section bigger, we see here we have page 1 and page 2, and then there's something here called a parent page. So actually if I go over to parent, this is what we call a master. So this is a sort of template that then gets applied to every single page. So now I'll go over here and I see that I am still not able to introduce my page number because probably I need to add a text box. So the tool right over here for type tool, I can create a little text box right here on the bottom left corner. And then inside the text box, I can insert a special character, and now we can see the option for page number is not grayed out. So I can put current page number, next page number, previous page number, whatever it is I want to show. So obviously I'd want to show the current page number. I just click that right there. And for the master, it's going to show up as a letter, which might not make sense, but that's because it's the master, right? When we actually go to our page sets, we would see this change to a number. But here I can set the font that I want. So I'm actually going to go with my title font, Roboto Condensed Bold. Very nice. Make that tight around the letter. And that's looking good. Might end up making that bigger, but it's fine because I can always come back and change that in the master and have it spread to all other pages. So the only thing is here, I do want to set up a distance off of from the margin. So what I'm actually going to do is line it up neatly right here to the page margin, which is this magenta line. There we go. Have everything squared out. Now for the right hand side, if I can click on this page number, I can hold Alt and then drag. Oops, going closer. Hold Alt, click and drag in order to create a copy. And just slide over here to put it on the other side. And yeah, holding Alt and clicking and dragging is going to create a copy. That is pretty universal, but definitely at least within the Adobe software. Create another guide here for the margin. Now, the left-hand page was aligned to the left. However, this will be aligned to the right. In order to make sure it aligns properly, we can see up here on this top bar in the Essentials Classic layout, we have our Align Left button. So that's what was initially used on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, I want to align right. So now I can make sure that if I push this over to the right, it mirrors the other side perfectly. So save that. And I'll continue to add things to the master. I'll probably add in like the chapter title to the top and the book title. But for now, those might just be placeholders, right? So if on the top left, let's say, I wanted to put the title of the issue. I mean, I just copied over that text box, but what I really want to do is delete the page number here. And I want to type in, say, issue number 1. Now, what I typed in is invisible, right? That's because the type is actually smaller than the box. And I know that because there's a little plus sign that shows up on the right-hand side. And all I got to do is click and drag that plus sign till the text field is large enough to include the full text. Now I can double click into here to highlight everything. And over on my, here we had our paragraph styles, our alignment, right? However, if I want to align this to a certain part of the text box in terms of like vertically, right now we see that it's set to the top of the text box. If I click out of it, if I stretch this down, right, nothing really happens. It's just aligned to the very top. Now there's two ways to sort of go about this. You could either go to Window and bring up the Type and Tables windows here, and I can select Paragraph, and then Paragraph is going to give me the vertical alignment. No, it's not Paragraph. It is, actually, it's not even, I don't have to do anything. In Essentials Classic, it shows up over here on the right. It's just that I have to be outside of the text box. If I double click into the text, I have my alignment for, the general characters. But in order to see how the text actually aligns within the text frame, I don't have to click into it. I just select it and I have that right over here. So I have my align top, align bottom, align center. Let's go ahead and align center. And that looks good right there. So I can just put issue number 1, and then over here on the right hand side, I can copy that over. Same thing as we did with the page number, double click into here, align it to the right. And rather than the issue number, I could have the chapter name. And again, these are placeholders, subject to change later, but at least I can start seeing how the images are playing with these titles on the page. Man, looks like I'm freezing. Am I freezing up again? No, something weird happened. Something's going on with my computer lately. I'm gonna have to do some troubleshooting. It doesn't make sense for me to have to keep saving. I'm not able to download anything off of Google Chrome. I don't know what that's about, but I'm just gonna go ahead and blame this on the same sort of glitch. Okay, so there we see here, if I go to my page 2, I now have issue number 1 at the top and my page number on the bottom left. And because I selected a print template, it just understands by the print templates that, if I create a new page, a third page, that we are working with spreads, right? That we're working with pages, and that besides the cover and the back, we're actually going to have one page next to the other, which is why the master shows the right hand side as the master includes a left and a right hand page. Thank you, EM, for letting me know the video and the sound. Always good to get confirmation on that. Okay, so now that we're set up with one page, all I want to do now is copy my tiles over here on the left hand side. My frames on the left. I'm going to stretch this to meet the bottom margin. Copy them over to the right. There we go. So now I have 2 full pages of panels. So how do I start getting images into here, right? Well, if I open up some files, let me see, find over here real quick where I have some sample frames. If I go over to whatever folder you have your frames saved at, I'm going to use some of this concept art that I have and later come back and refine which ones I'm using. So I actually did create a title screen, but I'm just jump into the here we go, storyboarding. Yeah, I'm going to just jump into these renders that I had made as samples. So this all links over to my storyboard that I actually had set up on the iPad. If you have any questions, or you viewers, feel free to let me know in the chat. That comes through. But I'm just going to quickly bring up my storyboard on the iPad, because that's where I bring together all my images and sketches in this little app called Paper, which I went over in a previous stream where I did my sketch storyboard, right? Like a monkey. I'm going to show this to the screen. But I can actually bring this up here with a neat little app that I found for Windows called AirPlay Screen Mirroring. So it actually shows there my laptop as a device that I can screencast from an Apple device. And it's a little finicky sometimes, but for the most part, it's worked out great. There we go. So I now have my iPad screen on the computer screen. So yeah, this is this first page that I'm working with. So we open the black, then we fade into an aerial, we zoom in to one world, then we zoom in to one of those worlds where we see this studio setup. So now that we have this all set, I'm going to go ahead and call it page or spread one mockup, right? Now that we're moving away from the template. And so the first one I'm going to mock up is just pitch black. It's not truly pitch black. There'll be some text in there. Now I created a shape over another shape, and I made a little mistake of adding it into the same layer as panels. So I'm going to click over here on layer 2. I'm going to expand panels layer by clicking this little arrow. And the rectangle I just created, or whatever it is that you have selected, is going to actually be highlighted here next to your layers with this little colorful dot. So I can just click on here and drag it up into the layer 2 so that I know that that other rectangle is now sitting in layer 2. There we are. Now I want to switch the stroke to the fill, right? Because rather than having a border, I want this one to actually not have a border and only be filled in with black. So there's a real easy way to do that. We talked about the fill and the stroke being over here, and I can just use this arrow right here to swap them places. And there we go. All right. Next, we're going to fade into the aerial view. So this was actually a previous live session that we set those up. I'm going to go into my content folder and find the one where we worked with some AI dream textures. Here we are. So this is an aerial that I had set up. And a real easy way to place it into the frame is to just drag it from your files into the frame. And that just places the image right in there. So the real neat thing about using InDesign is, as opposed to other softwares, if this file were to change later, as long as it's in the same location and it's named the same thing, but it gets updated, right? It's actually going to update and modify in InDesign. So InDesign is a great program, not just because it's made for print and digital spreads, but because you're actually able to hold a lot of heavy images, a lot of heavy files in it without bogging it down, because really it's not saving any of these images in the actual file. It's linking from wherever they're existing, and it makes it super efficient. I don't have to go back and edit this later. Although I will, because everything I'm doing right now is just mocking things up and setting it up for you for the stream. But when I get all my frames done in a later session, I'll come back and actually drop in the real things. So then we go into our aerial view. So for this one, I'm actually going to just bring up the Blender file and start dropping these in from the real folder that I have, or the real file that I have. So I'm going to go here into my files, go find the Blender project, which is right here. Sequence 1. Nope, the one right under that. Sequence 1 is different. Don't save. I'm actually going to open both Sequence 1 and the studio scene, and I can just start getting out some real basic renders out of these two Blender files to start dropping into here. Why not, right? Let's take it all the way. So open up these two Blender files. Okay, so here I have one file, which is the studio, the aerial of the studio that I'll then zoom in on. I have a lot of stuff hidden, which is why you're seeing this sort of real bare bones. But when I actually go and hit render, which I'll render at 50% quality for the sake of speed, and again, the fact that I'm just mocking up this scene, give that a moment to start up. And in the meantime, we have this other shot. So this shot, we take a look at the rendered view. It's real basic. I'm going to hide these lights that I have here. Okay. Everything looks to be transmitting well, even though I have a lot of stuff going on my computer. But in this aerial view, you see I have this whole grid set up of different little worlds. I'm going to hit tab to edit into them. And I'm actually going to start modifying. I'm unable to remove. I'm going to start modifying all these grids just so they have different colors so that it matches what I had just shown in my storyboard on the iPad. I'm going to get rid of all these materials. Okay, now everything's glowing blue. And that's what I'm going to start duplicating from. So I'll add a new material slot. For that first aerial, and set it as material 1. There we go. We click here. We've obviously moved away a little bit from the InDesign portion, but that's okay. We're doing the full process here for the comic book, and it's getting out from the Blender environment. And come down here and just change the colors. I'm going to just quickly create a few different emissive colors here. So I'm going to make this one purple and assign that to this cell. I'm going to bring down the brightness on all these, maybe down to 5, something real light. Now I can bring this down over to material preview and have it take up less. Before I jump into that section, one more thing I'd like to note about the InDesign files is you can create different masters. So if I go over to pages and I right click over here and I hit new parent, I can hit how many number of pages do I want on the parent. I can just set it to 1, prefix B, that's fine. Name, I'm going to name it title page. That way if I do different issues of the comic book, I can actually use this file to come back and do, you know, all the different issues and follow the same template. And for this title page, I'm just going to call out the center, and then I'm going to roughly call out thirds here. I'll come back and actually finesse these to true size using the appropriate millimeter measurements. Okay, now we actually didn't talk about how to apply the parents because it automatically was applied having the parents over here onto these pages. But this one, as you could see, is actually using the original parent that I had created with the page numbers and the issue names and all that. So what I'm actually going to do is click on the new parent I just created right here, B title, right click and hit apply parent to pages. And then it'll prompt me to which pages, page number 1, hit OK. And now I see my guidelines have come in for that title page. Another point here is that my first 2 pages aren't actually going to be comic book strips. So I'm going to click on page number 1, hit 2 new pages here. So it pushes these down, right? So that's another thing. Whenever you add pages, it'll add pages from wherever you're working from. So if I was working in the title page, like I just was, and I hit new pages, it inserted those pages before the following ones. If I were working on these and I hit new pages, right, they follow that one. Notice that it also uses the parent pages that you're using in your current active page. So here I have my title masters, my title parent pages being applied to those following pages, which is wrong. So I'll go ahead and make sure that I'm selected in page 2 and 3 right here. Select my A parent, right click, apply parent to pages, and then pages 2-3. Okay, and there we go. Just like that, we've changed it up. So the reason I did that is because actually this first one is going to be a full-on spread for the title shot, which was made also in a previous live stream. We'll go over to content, lives, and we'll go back to our 3D letters, composition, and lighting stream where I had set up these 2. And here's where I can start mocking things up real quick. I could see how this title page could look as a one full spread. So if I were to be lucky enough to not worry about bleed, I can make this a full page. Or I can bring this one in that I use as a thumbnail for the YouTube video and see how it would look if I spread it out on the 2 pages. Notice also that there's 2 ways to bring in files, right? You saw how if I brought this one in, it is kind of attached to my mouse cursor, right? So if I click and drag, right, I can set the size of wherever I click and drag onto. However, if I drag it over, and I just click, it actually brings it in at the resolution that it is, right? Depending on the file format that I'm using. Now I need to resize this one, right? So if I were to just resize it, it crops, right? That's because earlier I dropped in these images and had them just fit those shapes that I created. Whereas here, it created what's called, even though these were shapes, they still act as frames, right? Frames are containers for media, right? Within InDesign. Anything can be a frame. A photo, a shape. You can draw with the pen tool and kind of do an organic frame. So when I drag this, it's cropping the image because it's editing the frame. I have to click on this center image here, or this sort of center dial, in order to actually scale the image itself. However, you now see we have this blue outline on the outside, so the frame is much larger than the image. In order to change the image and the frame together, I gotta hold control, right? However, what's happening now? I'm not constrained to any proportions. So by holding control, I'm changing the image and the frame size, but it's stretching it. So in order to not stretch it, we hold shift. So in order to change both the frame and the image, in proportion, we hold shift to hold proportion, and we hold control to move them both together, and then have them just both reach the edge of the frame. You gotta have those held down before you click and drag. That's why it didn't work that time. There we go. I'll do the same thing for the other side. And this looks cool as a full spread. I really don't know what I would do with the other page if I just had this on one side. Maybe it'd be cool to extend this render and have some sort of abstract version of the world on the right side for this one. For now, I'll keep this in the back, but I'm going to imagine this as a full spread with creation is the first half as instruction. And I'll obviously want to move these around later so that I have no letters getting cut out into the middle of the booklet. I forget what that's called, where the two crease into each other. They're sort of hard to see when they're tucked in like that. Now, again, I'm just mocking things up. So I'm going to go over to my layers. Rather than panels, I'm going to place a layer right under that. Same thing as with pages, right? You can just use the bottom right icon to create a new layer. And this one I will call backgrounds, in case that I ever need backgrounds besides the panels. And again, I would select these two here, look for them in the panels layer, and we see them right here because they're highlighted. Also, you'll notice the layers stay consistent throughout pages, but I don't actually see any other elements in different pages, right? I only see the elements that are within those layers on the current active pages. So all those other panels and all the other pages don't show up for me right now, which keeps things very, very neat. I'll expand this and hide the one in the back. So I'm only working with this one. And I'll actually copy paste it, place it right here, expand my backgrounds layer, select the one underneath, and I'm actually going to hold control and stretch down. You're supposed to be underneath. Why are you on top? Oh, right. In InDesign, layer order doesn't necessarily translate to visibility, right? So what I actually need to do here, no, it does. Maybe I was just gotten a little confused there with my layers. But in any case, if you're ever having trouble organizing your layers in order to put things in front or behind other things, you can always right click on the element that you want to move forward or backward. Hit right click, and you can go to arrange, send backward, or send to back. Because it's all the way on the top and there's no other items, I'm not able to send it forward or send to front, but those would also be options that show here. And you can always check your shortcuts right there. Okay, so I'm going to also stretch this up, holding control. There we go. And I'm just kind of cheating this so I can get the the gradient here to fit the whole page without me having to edit the original image. Now I'm just expanding the frame of the image that's on top. so that it covers the bit of text that's peeking from the bit in the background. So now that I've enlarged the frame, you can see the green border. The green border is extending past the letters. In order to fully hide that now with the front layer, I'm going to click on the center dial that we talked about so that I can get my image frame, right? Not the container frame. And I can hold Alt to scale from the center, right? So I'm stretching everything based off of the center, and again, hold Shift to change everything in proportion. So I can just make it snap to its new frame size. And there we go. I'm hiding my background image, and that looks real clean. Again, I'm just mocking things up. However, the gradients do seem to come through very nicely. Now, here's another little trick, right? I'm not able to see now my issue number or my page numbers. So a cool thing to do here where I had to go full bleed would be to again duplicate or right click over here and duplicate my parent pages. Right? And for this one, I'm just going to select all the text that's here. Oop, Control 0 to always bring your full page into view. Select all the text that I got here. Go into my window, types and tables, character, so that I can edit the character itself. However, that is not bringing up what I want to see. So window, type and tables, effects. That's also not it. I'm looking for the one that gives me color. Maybe it's color. Nope. I'm trying to avoid having to click into each one in order to change the color. And there is a way to do this. Conditional text, cross-reference, paragraphs. Huh. Oops. You know what? It might just be as simple as the properties window. Utilities, tables, tools, text wrap, properties. There it is. So if I select this right here, I expand this down. If it's text, it should show me the text color over here on the right-hand side. However, it does not. I'll just go ahead and double click into it. And right up here, where you see the swatches change, so you can have the fill for the text or the stroke for the text change. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch these all to white. Whenever I edit this live stream, I'll have to come back and show how it is that you do that all together. For the sake of moving this forward right now, I'm just going to go do it the dummy way. And hide my extra windows now. They're in the way. Jeez, there we go. Zoom into here. We are. Switch over to white. And now I go back to my pages. So I go back to these spreads and right click on that new parent that I created, see parent, apply parent to pages 2 and 3. All right, and now I have my issue number, my chapter name, and my page numbers. It looks like I accidentally made that blue. Let's go ahead and change that real quick to white. Looks like it is showing up in color. If I select my text here, nope, it showed up for a second and then it went away. I'll find that and I'll place it in the edited recording of this video. Go back to my pages. So now I have my opening spread. I've got my panels here. And that's as far as setting up the template file for the comic book. Really, we have some panels. Oh, I guess one thing we could do before moving on to bringing up the mockups into this file is set up my text bubbles, right? Because typically in comic books, you have these bubbles that go over the image that tell you what's going on with the story and what people are saying. So I'll go ahead and create a new layer atop all the other layers. In this one, what was this rectangle? These are placeholders. So I'll just call this layer placeholders. And above that one, I'll create a new layer, call it text bubbles. Okay. Now the text bubble thing is the reason really why I want to mock this all up before I actually do it for real, because the placement of the text bubbles is going to take place in InDesign. And I need to account for this when I'm designing my panels, right? Like if I do a full-on beautiful render for a panel, but then I have to cover up 20, 30% of it with text, it's not going to look great. So, or it's not going to make as much sense. So I need to account for where I want to place these things first, right? To then have them all set up here. So what I want to do with my text bubbles is actually not make them full black or like the same thickness stroke as I have on the outside. So I'll go over here and stroke and set it to half the weight. And that might even change later. Now I also want to point somewhere besides just having my rectangle, right? That's typically what you do to show who's speaking or calling something out. So I'll go over here and use the pen tool. And with the pen tool, I'll just go and click here, click there, make a little triangle, right? I can then overlay that here with the rectangle, and I can right click and hit group, right? Problem is, now they have different strokes, they have different weights, they have different everything. So what I'm going to do is now double click to get into the group, right? So now I'm isolated to just editing items within this group. I'm going to select no stroke, and I'm just going to leave the white fill, select the triangle, also hit no stroke, and select a white fill for this one. Actually, what I should be doing is setting the paper color, which is right here in swatches. So this sort of actually reads as not supposed to be printing white, which plotters do, right? But if you have a different color paper, you know, it just reads as not printing any ink, right, through that region. Okay, so now this whole group is just a rectangle with a triangle in it, right? What the heck? We need to add a stroke. So we'll go over into our window and bring back the effects panel. I'm going to have this placed over with swatches. And with effects, I'm going to hit this right here where it says FX for effects. And here I can add usually you should be able to add a stroke to this, but I'll just go ahead and add an outer glow. And I'm going to fake a stroke. So I'm going to fake a stroke. I'm going to go ahead and hit normal, set the outer glow to black, opacity 100, technique precise, and then make it larger. Make sure you have this checked off right here for preview so we can see what the glow is looking like. So you see there, as I change the size, we have this outer glow spreading out more. But if I change the spread, if I take it up all the way to 100%, we see that the outer glow actually spreads, right, to the full size. So now if I just tone down the size, my outer glow turns into a stroke. Instead of 1 millimeter, let's see if I can type in here 0.5. There we go. So now because it's an effect, you know, oops, I'll click out of the group. There we go. Because it's an effect, right, I can move these things together and it'll always keep that effect. Not just that, but using the direct selection tool, I can go within the group, move this triangle over, and it changes live. If I select this triangle and select this little dot and move that dot around to change the shape of the triangle, my stroke continues to follow the overall shape, right? So this is a real quick way to be able to set this up properly. I'm actually going to clean this up a little bit and have these points meet the very edge of the other shape. Just a little bit more down. There we go. I don't need to worry about that line streaking across. That's just the program telling you that there's two shapes and that is where one shape overlaps the other. That won't actually print that way, so I don't have to be concerned with that right now. Okay, so for this panel, I'll probably have some text, but it probably won't have a triangle. So what I'll do is I'll move this chat bubble over there, and then right click here to ungroup. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, not fine. So because I ungrouped, it deleted the stroke that I added in. So what I need to do is actually use the direct selection tool and delete, oh, not everything. Direct selection tool and delete just the triangle. There we are. It looks like that still eliminated our effect. So I'm gonna go back into effect, set back to outer glow. I had set it to 0.5 millimeters at 100% spread, set it to normal and set it to black and 100% opacity. Cool. Something else I've been wanting to do with this is actually add a drop shadow, just to add that sort of next level interactivity. To kind of make it seem like things are popping off the page. So I'll hit effects again on the group here and add a drop shadow. I can see here, I don't want it to be too crazy because it does take away from the image a little bit, but I'll have it tightly over it, right? 1 millimeter distance is fine. Just, I like to do things in either doubles or thirds. So having it be twice as large as the strokes that I had set, and I'll bring it down to like a 30% opacity, so it's really light, and set it to multiply. That's all good. I can tweak the size here, but I think 2 millimeters there is fine. Just feeling that out. Okay. Same thing for this one. I'll add an effect, drop shadow, and set it to, what was it, 30%. There was in Illustrator and in Photoshop, you have a way of, if I select this group, I can right click and I can copy. And then if I go over here and I right click and hit paste. Ain't that one for the blooper reel. I could paste the effects, but I don't see that actually happening here. I'm gonna put it over white so I can see what's happening. Go back to my polygon, effects, drop shadow. Bring this down to 2 on size and 1 on distance. Now, if I wanted all of these to use the same one, I would hit use global light. So watch what happens. If I click on this one and the group and I change both of them to use global light, right? You see how it's kind of shading as though the light were on the left and the shadow's casting over to the right. However, if I go here and I then move this angle around, we see that it's also changing on the left-hand side one, right? And it actually is bringing up a bubble, which I don't need it to tell me again, right? Even though I'm editing the one on the right, if I change the global light, it's using one light for all the sources, right? So I think I'm gonna have it set by default like that. So every time I copy this, I'm using the same light source, and then I can just uncheck global light from whichever one I want to eliminate that from. So there we go. I have one panel set up and I have my chat bubble open. Now, the next thing here is I want to set up a text frame. So now that I have my text bubble set up, I'll set up my actual text layer. And this is going to be set up with Montserrat font. So I'm going to do Montserrat medium. Try that out. Yep. So we can put, for example, I shouldn't be glowing red. That means that I don't have the font installed. There we go. Okay, so we could just say placeholder text for explaining the frame currently shown here. Not very creative, I know. And if I zoom out, that's obviously way too big, right? So we'll select this and we'll bring down the font size. I don't have to double click into it to change it every time. I can bring up these different panels that'll help me do that. So for example, properties tends to have everything that you need. However, for specific to type, there's all the type windows. So character, conditional texts, paragraph, index text. Get into that more in another session. But here, I think 8 point is really as small as you can go for readable text. And that's playing pretty nice with the whole frame. I don't want to go with Comic Sans, which is the typical one used for comics, but it's just it's getting a lot of hate on the internet. Some would say rightfully so, some would say not rightfully so. Either way, I'm not using it. Same as before, clicking on the text frame, setting it to center. So there we go. Now that text is centered in the box, and I can always click on both together and resize them together. Right? And there I can always make sure that if I'm resizing them together, right, that it'll be centered within the box no matter what. Now, I don't like the hyphenated text. A lot of times that's set by default. I'm just going to go over here to, I actually have to open up my paragraph. So type, paragraph, uncheck hyphenate, and then drop that over here for me to use later. Right there. There we go. Cool. So now that I have my 3D scenes open, I believe I hit render on this one, view the render, add a GPU memory. So I'm asking too much of my computer to be rendering these things out, having two of these open at the same time, and having InDesign set up my main file. So I'm just gonna save what I've done with my 3Ds and just drop in a couple more mock frames. So I'll go over here to my main folder, and I'll go over to my concept art and just start dropping in some aerials. So we have this one, for example, which was the AI generated image that helped me stylize a lot of the work. So again, I drop it in there and it looks cropped in because it comes in at full scale. So I just got to click on that little circle thing and I see the frame pop up for the entire thing. And I can scale that down holding shift so that I can get it nice and set up within that frame. And I want to actually lean it. I guess it's just something I need to decide whether I want the bubbles to be, I'm actually going to do something here. I'm going to group these together. Well, I created a text frame here just like that, but the reason I did that was to add that extra shape. But what I can do to the text frame, if I don't double click into it, because then I start changing the text color, I can actually start setting the fill from here. So I can set the white fill and the black stroke right there. I don't know why I'm doing that color gradient every time when it turns out that the swatches panel here has black and white, much easier to click. So if I were to do that again, if I empty those out, again, whichever one is laid on top is going to change first. So if I select stroke, I can do here for black, and then I can go here for paper color. And, ooh, I must have done it to something else. Yep, I think I edited the colors on something else that I clicked on, but that's fine. Now that I have that set within the text frame, I don't need that extra shape, right? But I'll probably still want to group in with these little shapes whenever it becomes a chat bubble. Now there is one thing here, right? Because I'm using the text frame itself to create the shape, the text is right up against the frame. And so it's right up against that line. I don't like that. So I'm going to go into Object, Text Frame Options, and right here, I can start setting some spacing. So I can just increase the spacing to the left. Again, remember to hit the preview so you can see the changes that are happening. So you see there, it's adding the same spacing all around, which is actually good. I'm going to keep it at 1 because that's double the outside stroke that I've been using. Right? I want to make sure that the stroke is actually set to 0.5, not 1. I want it to be thinner. No, I do want it to be 1. I had set something else to 0.5. The shadow. So I'm kind of going in halves. So the panel is 2, the text box is 1, and then the shadow is set at 0.5. I also want to add the shadow into this text frame. So same thing as before. I can go over into effects and add the same effects that I added earlier to the shapes as I do to the text frame. So there we go. I have my drop shadow. I had set my distance to 1, my size 2.5, and my opacity to 30. Okay. There it is. All set nicely within the text. So if I were to copy this over, all I got to do is change the text that shows in the panel, and I'm all set, right? I don't have to keep doing the same thing over and over. It's already, the formatting is already set as I like it. Also, rather than have it left, I should have it left justified. I might change my mind on that later, but for now, I think that's how I should have it. So I have this white line happening over here. I moved my image way too far to the right, so I'll just enlarge it a little bit so it fits the full frame. There we go. This is really starting to come together now. And I can even keep this panel here and drop in a new placeholder. So if I go back, go over to renders, and I have another mock image here, which is, oh, that was a PDF. No, that's a movie. So actually, this is a cool chance to, well, it's a looping animation. So that could be cool if I do end up doing something interactive. However, for right now, which to show this too, it's really cool when you're mocking things up. You don't need anything to be full quality. I can screenshot this. So I don't even need to, this will make the file heavier, so beware. But I can right click into here and hit paste into, and it'll paste whatever image I've copied into the InDesign file. This is not now a linked image. It is embedded in the InDesign file, which will make it heavier than just linking your images. But, know that you can do that, and that's all right when you don't have that many pages or that many things linked. So I don't like this static. We want to create some dynamism, some contrast. So I'll move that over to the left and then move that over to the right. You don't want text boxes to sit too far from each other either. I mean, it depends, right? If people are conversing, you kind of want the text boxes to flow, the little chat boxes. But if you want text to stand out, or you're not necessarily having a conversation going on, you're describing what's going on in the comic book, you can take some more liberties with that. But yeah, let's finish out one page just with mock images. So take it back, go into, man, what did I do with all my mock images? Content, lives, storyboarding on paper, or the 2023 project, footage, no. I do this all the time. I clean up all my files because I think that I should be better organized, because I just start, I think, oh yeah, this will be a main file and it'll be good to have over here. And then I end up doing many iterations of it, and then I end up just rendering into that folder anyway. And then one day I clean up and I forget where I put things. Well, at least I'm keeping some things consistently on the desktop. So I can actually replace this AI image with the real deal. It's not that the AI image is better or worse than what I did, but stylistically, things will be more coherent because I'm rendering out everything from the story in the same format. I do need to zoom out of this panel so that I can fit it as I had just had it composed. Let's look again for some other mock images. So if I take it back, go to my storyboard, first sequence, here we go. I had rendered out this whole animation. So actually, this image I can copy because it is linked, and I can paste in place. I'll just move it over. I'll delete this panel and just slide over this panel. And now I can drop in the aerial one of these aerials here from the animation into this panel here. Very nice. Actually, everything has to move over one. So I'll move this over to the right. So definitely when getting the sequence in, I don't want to resize these panels, right? Because as you can see, I'm just moving things around super quickly just because everything is evenly spaced and respecting the guidelines. As long as I make sure that I'm copying things in the right place. And then when I have my images set in the right place, I can start resizing the panels and having a bit more fun with, you know, the composition of the whole page. So now if I come down on the animation to show a bit more of what's going on, I like this one. Ooh, I was about to do the same mistake as before. Actually delete that out of there, place this one here, have it fit the right size. I can bring this one over. Very nice. Oh man, it's clear I am starting to get tired. I dropped that into the wrong place. There we are. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. Now, obviously these first two are total placeholders, but that's okay. The bottom half of the frame is more true to what the final result will be, and all these will be storytelling text boxes. So I can start just mocking up how I want these images to be composed so that it's dynamic. So we kind of have the text boxes. I kind of like that, sort of like staggering down the page, because it kind of makes you got to think about how the eye is going to travel between the frames. So we could start on the top right, you know, work our way towards the right this way, and then this way, this way. Maybe I want this to just move down. I definitely have to build more space for myself here. So those are good notes to have for later. I'd move this over to the right. And then, yeah, maybe that can sit on the top fine. Or maybe it goes down and then up. Definitely some play to be tested out here. Resizing the frames can also be interesting. So for example, I mean, this black frame is just going to be, I have to still sort of mock that up. It was like thinking in between of a story of a short film and a comic book together, but I want to add in like mostly black, but like light lines. So it looks like a city is glowing in the distance. And then as we approach those glowing lines, which is this panel on the right, it'll be obvious that those lines make up these different cells. And then we zoom into one of those cells and we have this one world isolated. And then we notice that this little speck in that little cell is actually a little island with a floating home on top. And then we start to see some architectural details in that floating home. And then we actually see, wow, it's fully furnished and it has an interior. In the next page, we'll introduce the character. So I've gone well over time with an InDesign setup and actually did some good storyboarding here with the first page, but this is well on its way. Again, I'm just going to be going through mocking up this whole story. That's going to be the first pass. If you saw last week, I started up with the car and the character, which are main parts of the story. So really with just those rough assets, I'm going to start just putting out renders out of Blender to fill out pages. And I'm going to get into up to 30, 40 pages of images that tie to the story in an efficient manner, and then actually come back and refine all the images that are used in all the different cells. So if you stuck around for this one, I hope you found it intriguing, helpful, if not entertaining. A few hiccups here and there, but you know, that's what it is with the live streams. I am doing a better job of preparing myself. Definitely putting on a persona, right? I'm doing a better job of preparing myself for these sessions so they do go smoother or there's less lulls. You know, sometimes like today I have a late session because I had a work call and that's just what it is, and still showing up and coming here to do it anyhow. So the cut up videos will have much more direct value on the content. But if you're here live, which I very much appreciate you being here, please let me know in the chat what you think of what's going on. Ask me questions. Tell me that looks like crap. Tell me that looks great. Please give me feedback. That's why I'm doing this. I appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you for the next one. Thanks. Have a great night or evening, wherever you're at.